guys. Today we're so excited. Welcome back a very special guest, our first ever guest, which was 4 years ago, which was crazy. Cooper Surles. Cooper is a former co-host of the Big Swing podcast, where he teamed up with MLB pitcher Ross Stripling, which is one of my personal favorite pitchers, to dive into real conversations with professional athletes and share their own takes on everything from sports to life on the field. If you haven't already, make sure to check it out, the Big Swing Podcast, which I'll put in the description below for you guys to check out. It's where athletes go talk about sports, most of all baseball. And trust me, you want to swing by and listen. But welcome back, Cooper. I'm so excited to have you back on again. It's been so long.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I feel like I'm cemented in history as the first ever guest of your show. So I'm excited. Almost a 4-year anniversary since you started your show, and so I'm excited to be back on.
Yeah, it's crazy. 4 years. Like it doesn't feel like it's been 4 years to be quite honest with you. It
Not at
feels
all.
like it's been like a year, not like 4 years to be quite honest. I mean, things have changed since when I first started. It was bad when I first started, don't get me wrong, but it's part of the journey, which is crazy. It's been basically 4 years.
No, I remember us talking a lot about that, like asking me kind of how you get a lot more comfortable, how you continue to improve, and I think my answer to you was just keep pressing record and keep going, and eventually you'll feel a lot comfortable seeing yourself on camera and listening to yourself, because that's always a weird part of it when you're doing the podcast, but also doing the like producing and editing, is you have to hear your voice over and over, and that can be a little weird. So
Yeah, like I don't know if you were like this, but anytime I edit an episode, whether it's from maybe 4 years ago, I look back at it or like editing an episode I'm putting out that day, I absolutely hate listening to myself to speak. Even if it's editing, but I was like, well, why should I edit if I already know what I'm gonna say, you know? But it's
yeah.
still very hard to like listen
Well,
to
and
the voice.
when you're editing too, you're having to just re-listen to the same thing over and over, and you're like, man, I didn't realize I sounded like that. Or then you start to get overcritical. But yeah, it's good when we finally got to a point, I remember in our podcast, where we were just like, you know what? I think people like to hear you authentically say things, whether you make mistakes or you use too many ums or whatever it is. I think in the end, people would prefer to feel like they're in the room with you. And, in real life, you're not talking with an editing button or editing out all the ums or likes you say. So in the podcast world, I think it probably should be pretty similar.
No, right? Like after your point, like after doing it for so long, you just don't care about having to
Yeah.
edit as much like words or repeats, like compared to 4 years ago, maybe when I first started. Like when I first started, I was
Yeah.
like, I really don't care. But at this point in time, I'm like, well, the podcast's 4 years old. Like I feel like I should care more than I did 4 years
Yeah.
ago. Even
Yeah.
though everyone wants to know like the behind the scenes of it, what he kept saying without editing, which I totally get. I'm the same exact way, but after a while, you're like, I'm the type of person that hates hearing the
Yeah.
exact same thing a million times in the span of 5 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
So, like, things have been absolutely crazy. Like, I know it's been 4 years since we last chatted. So, like, what have you been up to since we last talked? I know you and Ross ended up stopped doing the podcast a little after we talked, but what kind of have you been up to recently?
Yeah, no, the podcast was amazing. Like it was, Ross and I are really close friends. So, and we have really busy jobs and lives that require us to be traveling all the time. So we don't really spend a lot of time together. So the podcast was a really awesome opportunity for us to always stay in touch and be able to have a set time every week to speak. So we really enjoyed it. And we didn't stop it for any reason other than just, kind of it ran its course. We felt like we kind of peaked as a show, and we wanted to kind of end it on top. So we ended it a few years back, and we still reminisce about it and talk about it all the time. But so I think just at this point, just I'm in the sales business. I'm in front of customers all the time. I'm speaking to people all the time. So I think a lot of the same things I was doing in the podcast, I'm doing today. And I think a lot of the podcast experiences have really helped me in my current position now. Just being able to communicate with all different types of people, having to hold the conversation when maybe there's some dead air or whatever it might be. So I think I really think back on the podcast experience really positively, and I think it's improved my life and my career right now. So
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like, I feel like with podcasting, like, it does help you grow as a person, like holding conversations. Like that was something that I personally didn't know when I first started. I feel like I just did research and started without listening to other episodes of people. Like
yeah,
you and Ross's podcast was one of them I listened, but I didn't take it seriously. I just kind of sent out emails and just did interviews. I wasn't prepared like 4 years ago
yeah.
as I am today. At least after a while, you just like you are more prepared to hold conversations that you did when you first started out. And it also helps you like what conversations when maybe you're at work or talking to customers, if you're in that sort of business of like being directly straight up a customers, the customer service or something, like it really does help you with that in the long run though.
Yeah, it's very much I think with a lot of things in life, but I think for podcasts, for Ross and I's experience, and it sounds like for you, it's very much like a fake it till you make it, and then you look up like a year later, and you're like, oh wait, I'm kind of just doing this now, you know. And I think
Mhm.
I think we make the mistake in life of thinking that everyone has all of their stuff together all the time, and I think a
Mhm.
lot of people are kind of just pretending until they look up in a little bit and realize like, oh, they are actually doing it at a high level because they've developed the skills. And I think podcasting is no different. So
No, it is. Like because the podcasting, it's become very popular like in recent years. Like the Robbins podcast, like the Joe Rogan podcast is also very popular and so many other shows. Like for me, like I wasn't sure how like you and Ross felt when you guys started, but I didn't expect my podcast to be lasting a year. I thought it was going to last a few months. I just kind of did it just so I can just keep myself busy during the pandemic since I really didn't have anything to do. I was in like eighth or ninth grade when I started recording. And now I'm a senior in high school, and I was probably like eighth grade at that point. Now that I'm thinking of it, but it's crazy because now 4 years later, I'm like, how did I make it 4 years thinking I was probably
yeah,
gonna last it a few months? It's
and
crazy.
most people do. I think it's like the average podcast length is 2 episodes or something.
Yeah,
It's
it's like
very
it's between
most
like
people.
2 and 8 episodes, I believe, or
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah, exactly. So it's I think that's honestly when we look back at our podcast when Ross and I talk about it, like that is the thing we're most proud about is that we, over the course of a couple of years, like we were really consistent and put out a podcast once or twice a week, very consistently, and that was what we, discussed when we went into it. Is if we're going to do this thing, let's really do our absolute best to be consistent every week. That way, people, I know for me personally, like with podcasts, like it is a part of my daily routine. It's
Mhm.
Wednesday and I listen to this specific podcast. And we kind of knew that we wanted it to be successful and we wanted people to enjoy it. Then it has to become a routine for someone. So I think we did a really good job of being consistent with it.
Yeah, you guys definitely did. Because you guys release episodes like a couple times a week. You guys
Yeah.
always had like episodes out, whether a guest or just you two talking. I mean, if you are a podcast host, it really does become a part of your routine. Whether
Yeah.
you're recording one day or the next day you are editing. Because for me, I just edit and publish whatever day I'm available. Because sometimes I'm like, one day I'm at work and I have no time to do it, or I have some things going the next day. So I don't have a straight up like day I release. It's like for me, I'm always like maybe I don't post one week, but I post like 3 episodes the next week. It always
Yeah.
depends on a day. But it's always the part of the routine because you're always editing, emailing people, like publishing. Like it really does become part of your routine. And also listen to other podcasts every single day is really also helpful too. Like if you're a
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Definitely. Yeah. It's a good skill to develop. I think just as you grow into college and in your career one day to have that like consistency and dedication to something, I think you're going to find there's a lot of value to that.
No, exactly. Like you and Ross still talk about doing the podcast again, or do you guys kind of think it's like a long gone type of situation?
We joke about it sometimes, like every once in a while, like if something's happening in the sports world, we kind of say like, man, I wish we had our podcast to get this take off or whatever. But
Yeah.
maybe one day, Ross has three young kids now, so it's
Mhm.
I know he's pretty busy. So maybe down the road, we've always kind of left that door open for ourselves. Like if one day we felt like it was a good timing to get back into it, but I think right now we're both a little bit too busy to add one more thing to our life. But yeah, you never know. Always the door's open, and we have that knowledge and continuity together now. It's that way. If we were to want to do something like that one day, it'd be pretty easy for us to just kind of pick it right back up. So
Yeah, that is true. The sports world is never ending, whether it's in baseball, football,
yeah,
hockey. 'Cause I know, like, right where we're recording this, NFL draft just started yesterday. So,
yeah,
I mean, there's always stuff going on in the sports world, like, it never ends, whether it's in
absolutely.
NHL, MLB, basketball, like, there's always something going on.
Yeah, that's the great part about it, and that's why there's so many sports podcasts and sports shows. Because to your point, it's a new story every single day, and so it's fun to always have a changing narrative and changing storyline. So
No, actually. And I have to ask this. So I know this was like 2 years ago when this happened, but how did you feel at that time when Otani signed with the Dodgers? Like, did you have an opinion on that?
it was awesome. I like seeing I like seeing these premier players like be on these big time markets. Like I know
Mhm.
that might be people would disagree with that, but I just enjoy watching all time great players play for these all time great legacy organizations. I think it just holds a lot more weight to it, just similar to Luka being on the Lakers now. I find
Mhm.
that really interesting, and I want to see the greats be absolutely great, and I think it elevates them to another level when they're on one of these legacy franchises. So I was
Especially I got a great team and it helps him improve. And also like with him last year, like I think it was his first season with the Dodgers. I could be wrong. First or second
yeah,
season, he won a World Series. So
right.
it's you have to be good in order to be with a great team.
And especially in baseball where there's no salary cap, that
Mhm.
if you're with one of these huge organizations that's willing to spend a lot more than other people, then you're going to give yourself the best chance to win a title. So if I were a really great player, I would much be I'd be more willing to sign with a great organization that has the money versus a team that's not willing to spend the money, because that's really the only chance you have to win in baseball.
No, I'm the same exact way. I mean, I'd rather be with a great team than the money, to be honest. I mean, money's a big factor, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, I'd rather with a team that really meets my needs and also has a good organization rather than a bad reputation.
Yeah, and they're already making so much money that if they sacrifice a little bit, it's not a huge hit to them.
Oh yeah, like especially with the Guan Soto Mets deal, that's really insane. Like that
Yeah,
deal, like I was like, that's a lot for Guan Soto in the Mets. That's just crazy.
yeah, it's crazy. I remember being Ross and I with Corey Seager when he was talking about his new deal with the Rangers, and I just remember him kind of walking through that conversation and how it went. It's just it's an unbelievable process, and it's a crazy life changing moment when that happens for people.
It is. Like I was at work when it happened. I was literally working. And I remember like at one moment I pulled out my phone. Like it was right when I think it was like Mets, Dodgers, Yankees or something like that that was in the mix. And I remember and he wasn't signed yet. So I was kind of like thinking like, oh, he's probably gonna go back to the Yankees. Like he's probably just gonna stay there for a few more years. And because I know Yankee fans loved him. So I was thinking, oh, he's probably gonna sign back with the Yankees for a multi-million deal or something. I didn't really think much of it. I was like, Dodgers don't really need him, but if we get him, that'd be amazing. We have tons of good outfielders. So I was like, either way, like I won't get mad if he doesn't sign with the Dodgers. And I pulled out my phone at one moment and it said Juan Soto signed with the Mets. I was like, what? And then I looked where my father sent that to me, but it didn't say how much he was getting. So I was like, how much is he getting if he signs with the Mets? I'm like, there's no way.
Yeah,
He's signing with the Mets if unless they gave him a lot of money. Then I saw the money. I'm like, no wonder
yeah,
he signed with the Mets. Like I would
yeah. Their
he gave me that much.
their owner has unlimited money and he's ready to spend it. So
I
they're
know. I think the
pretty,
Yankees gave him like around the same money the Mets did. They offered him,
yeah,
I believe.
yeah, pretty crazy.
Crazy
It's
because
crazy.
I was like, you'd rather go with the Mets than the Yankees, who almost won a World Series last year. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of insane to go with the
But
Mets.
I also, I can also see a player that, it has been in that environment that feels that what that pressure feels like to play for the Dodgers or play for the Yankees. And,
Mhm.
they might experience that for a few years and they realize like, you know what, I'm at the point in my career where I want to play baseball and make a lot of money, but I don't necessarily want to have the crazy pressures that it comes with being on the Dodgers or the Yankees or the Red Sox. So I could also see that argument too.
Yeah, which makes sense. I mean, it can depend on the person. Sometimes they rather be with a winning team, and sometimes they just kind of want to keep their low key life and just make a lot of money at the same time.
Yeah, yeah,
And
both
that
are
was
fair.
how like I kind of went into it with Ohtani. Because as a Dodger fan, I really wanted him because he can pitch and he can hit, he can do a little bit of everything. And I didn't think he was going to sign with the Dodgers. I thought he was kind of like long gone. But I really wanted him. Because as a Dodger fan, I was like, I could use Ohtani because he can pitch it and he can hit. And that was kind of like in the mix of like when he tore his ACL. So I was like, even if he's out pitching for a year, I could use his hitting, even then he can pitch next year. Like, he's still out pitching right now. I know he's
Yeah,
been like his like routine game back. I don't think there's like a set date yet into when he's coming back, but hopefully maybe sometime before All-Star break or something, he's back or something. But when I found out Tani signed, I was literally crying. I was like, there's no way Tani signed the Dodgers. There's no way.
yeah,
But that
yeah,
really was an amazing deal. That I'm so glad we got him. At the same time, I'm like, how do we land Otani in this situation?
yeah. It's wild. It's a luxury to have someone great at both sides. You can pick and
No,
choose how
true.
you
I
use
just can't wait for him to actually pitch for the Dodgers. That'll be a plus.
it. Yeah, it will be.
So, for the Big Swing podcast, like, what were kind of like the standout memories from your time co-hosting the podcast?
Yeah, I definitely there's a couple that come to mind, but I definitely would say that when we did a live show during spring training in Scottsdale at the Baseballism store, I me and Ross talk about it a lot, but we weren't sure if people were going to show up. We weren't sure like how it was going to go. We kind of just took a chance on it, and I remember us walking around the corner towards the store about an hour before the show, and there was like 20 or 30 people lined up outside the door. And I remember us kind of just it hitting us like, oh, wow, this is a really cool, special moment that people took time out of their day to come watch us. And then, we ended up having, I don't know, 100 plus people show up for the podcast. So I think for someone like me that, it's been a lifelong dream to do something like that. I remember really feeling like in my element and really excited and grateful for that opportunity. So Ross and I definitely talk about that one a lot. One that I wasn't in person for, but was a special interview was oh God, was Joe Kelly.
Oh, I
That was
love Joe Kelly. He's one of my
yeah,
personal favorites.
that was an interesting story. And I don't know if we've ever talked about this on the podcast, but we actually it was whenever he had the beef with the Astros and he did may or may not have thrown at them on purpose and we had him just a couple of days after and it was whenever the MLB was reviewing what his suspension would be. And so, Joe comes on the podcast and he just if you've listened to it, he just lets loose and I would tell anyone to go listen to that episode because it's one of the most open and forthright I've ever seen an athlete on a podcast. He really let him have it. And the league had found out that we had done this podcast and found out that he had some pretty wild things to say in the show. And so they were waiting to, announce his suspension after they heard the podcast to see if he had any incriminating stuff in it. And so we found out about this and so we just said, all right, we're not going to release it. We're just going to make y'all wait. So they ended up actually waiting a week or so to we were basically playing chicken with the league whether we'd release this podcast and we just said absolutely we're not going to release it. And then they finally just said, all right, we're going to put down a suspension. It's whatever 5 games and then we released it the next day. So it was a really like super fun week like going back and forth with like the MLB Players Union and the league and kind of refusing to release it even though they wanted us to. So I remember that being a really exciting time.
No, I remember that situation going on. I was like, at the same time, if I was in that situation, I'm like, I'm just gonna let it all out. I mean, I hate
Yeah.
Astros then and now I still hate them. But I remember listening to that episode. And I was like, gosh, he's not holding back. I mean,
Uh,
he's like not
and
letting
we
us
cut
get
some stuff too.
so. Like he's not
Yeah.
scared to let loose, which is great. I mean, every time he'll say something, I'm like, oh, here we go again. What is he gonna say now? Like, it
Yeah.
was
So I
really
live
a
in
good
Houston.
episode. At the same time, I was like, I just keep letting it out for me, please.
It was
It's okay.
crazy. Yeah, we were just like, let's get out of the way and just let them keep talking. But I remember, I'm in Houston, so I remember after we released the podcast, everyone at work, that even if they didn't know that it was me that did the podcast, everyone was talking about the podcast. And then like on local Houston sports radio, they were playing a bunch of clips from the show, and it was just an interesting time, like hearing people talk about this podcast, not knowing that I was one of the hosts of the show.
Yeah, like, did
Uh,
they know like you hosted a podcast, or was it kind
some
of like
people, yeah, some people
for the
did and some
secret?
people didn't, but it was just interesting and people organically bringing up the show without knowing that I was involved with that. So it was interesting. Yeah.
I know. If I was in that situation, I mean, not a lot of people I host know I host a podcast and it's kind of think like I have a regular life and just don't do anything. But once they see my social media pages or something or on the news, they're like, "Oh, you have a podcast." Like they don't know
Yeah.
that unless they see something on social media because I don't have to talk about it unless I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, I'm doing an interview." They're like,
Yeah.
"For a job?" I'm like, "No, no, I'm not actually." But it's like really to see yourself on the news as for that interview, you're like. That's crazy. That episode is probably like one of your most popular episodes that you guys
Yeah.
released.
That was our most viewed episode by a long shot. And
Oh, really? I'm sure
yeah,
it was.
remember Ross and I wrote down a list of like goals we had like when we started before we even recorded one episode, and the top of my list was to make the Sports Center bottom line like that says our show name and everything. And after that episode, it was on Sports Center all day on the bottom line and everything. So that was a moment where we were like, all right, we did what we set out to.
Yeah, like no one's gonna top like this moment after this episode. I mean, you guys had a lot of amazing episodes, but that episode was probably like the most tea you guys probably got out of someone.
Easily, yeah, easily. A lot of it's funny. Especially with these athletes, like there's only so much they feel comfortable saying, but we would record an episode and then we would stop recording, and right after we would sit there and maybe talk for 5 or 10 minutes before we said our goodbyes. But those 5 or 10 minutes were always the best stuff because they knew they weren't being recorded anymore, and they just kind of let it rip about whatever their organization, their situation, another
Mhm.
player, or something like that. So I remember Ross and I always being like, man, I wish we could have had added that to the show because a
I
lot of the
know,
best.
yeah. Like I know a tons of many minor league and MLB players that are kind of in the minors. And the amount of things people have to say about being in an organization, maybe I'm not going to name names, but maybe different like
Yeah,
MLB organizations is crazy. Like the
yeah,
way things handle different organizations is something I did not expect to hear.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of drama.
I know. Like, was that your favorite episode you got to film, or did you have like another episode that you kind of like recording?
Yeah, that was probably like one of our best memories for me personally was the Kirk Herbstreit one. That was someone that I like kind of like idolized as a kid. Always, he was on our screens every Saturday for college football. Ever
Mhm.
since I was a kid, and you know, for him to even just agree to come on the show was like such a special moment for us and I. And then I remember doing the episode. You just have those certain days where you feel like a little bit more on it, and you feel a little bit more confident and comfortable. And I just had one of those days, and I felt like, not only was it a Herb Street episode, but just for me personally as a podcast host, I thought that was one of my best performances. So just the combination of those two things. I think for me, I remember when we like closed the laptop. I remember that was the my favorite moment of just being like, wow, like we killed that. That was a huge guest for us. It was someone I looked up to my whole life, and he was someone that he was an amazing guy. Like behind the scenes, he was such a good dude. We probably sat on that Zoom and talked to him for an hour after the episode, just talking about football, talking about other life, all sorts of things. And I left that episode with like a ton of respect for him.
Like he seems like an amazing person. I grew up watching him too, so I was like,
Yeah,
he really seems like an amazing person. I never met him personally. I never interviewed him or anything, but whenever I seen him on like Sports Center or whatever he's on,
yeah,
he really does seem like an amazing person
yeah.
to
It's a great
people
guy.
and also on like when he's doing like sports coverage or something.
Yeah. He was a really good dude. Sometimes we've met people over the years with the podcast that you're like, I had a different opinion on them, but he was certainly someone that like lived up to the hype, not only from like a broadcasting standpoint during the podcast, but just as a guy, like he was the same person you see on TV that you see,
Mhm.
in person. So that was really neat.
Yeah, that's great you had that experience because I know like with a lot of people, they really show like being nice on television. Then once they're taping or meeting people, they're absolutely the most hated humans on the planet.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, there's some two-faced people. We were lucky. I mean, honestly, I can't think of many examples that we had where we felt like, that a person really didn't want to be there, or they didn't really treat us well in the interview. Like we were really lucky in that regard of having a lot of good people that, seemed like they were wanting to be there and engage in the conversation. So yeah, we were lucky.
Yeah, I was the same way. Like I feel like after 4 years, I really haven't had that type of situation. Thankfully, knock on wood. But at the same time, I'm like, thankfully, I really haven't witnessed it. Like at the same time, I'm like, if with people hearing about my age, I feel like they want to do it. That's kind of how I dragged people early on was because of my age. At that time, I was 14 when I started it. I'm 18 now. At the time that when I people heard 14, saw the email or message, they're like, I don't care about doing I don't do podcasts, but if you're 14, I'll do it. I'm like, that's what drags people. I don't say it anymore unless someone asks me if I'm wait how old I was. But that's what drags people to do it. If I didn't put that in an email, then
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know if I would have got as many guesses as I had today, to be quite honest with you.
No, yeah, it's definitely helps. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, especially someone like me and Ross that we did a show. It's like we had understanding and respect for like what people go through as far as like how hard it is to get guests and
Hmm.
scheduling all that. So we were pretty open about it. Like anytime someone were to ask us, we would, pretty much say yes because we just wanted to, we wanted to be available to people just like we hope people were available for us. So
Yeah, like I'm the same way. Like even if someone asks me to be on a podcast, I'm down for it because I know how hard it is to find guests for a podcast, especially nowadays. Like 4 years ago compared to now, it's still as hard to find guests. Some people reach
yeah,
out. Most of the time, I reach out to people, and it's always so hard, no matter how long you've been doing it or not.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
So to go back to the podcast, like originally, you guys came up with an idea a few years ago, right when I interviewed you in 2021. And I think we kind of talked about this when we had our last conversation, but how did you and then Ross come up with the idea for the Big Swing podcast?
Yeah, it actually was pretty organic. We were at a Houston Rockets game, and I've always been like a really avid listener of podcasts, and
Mhm.
Ross was he was trying to get into a few, and he was asking me for some recommendations, and I kind of just like organically as a joke just said like we should do a podcast, and he was like, yeah, let's do it, and then we kind of just went along with our day and just didn't think of anything of it, and then the next morning. I don't know if it was him or myself or one of us texted each other and kind of said like, "Wait, were we serious about that?" And we kind of at that point were like, "Yeah, I think we might be." And like I said, I had a lot of experience not actually doing a podcast, but just with how things should be formatted.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of editing experience, and so at that point we just kind of hit the ground running, and we spent the next few days coming up with ideas, names, logos, stuff like that, and then from there, we just kind of press record. And the first episode, I'll never forget. It was an absolute nightmare. We hooked everything up. We thought we were all good to go. Press record. The episode went great. It was with a personal friend, Dry Johnson. That was he's a quarterback coach for the Texans. He was a really great college football player. But we did it. We had a great episode. Everything with vibes were high. And then we get home and I plug it in to start editing it, and I realized that my microphone didn't work. And it was just one of those moments where like I remember us looking at each other like we might quit. This might be it. And thank God we kind of stuck through it and were able to figure out the audio and kept going. But that was a moment where I remember it was like the highest of the high to the lowest of the low. But
I know.
yeah,
Like for me, I'll be like, oh my God, I'm not doing this again with that one person.
yeah, yeah,
I'll never
yeah.
do that again.
Yeah,
Unless I,
it was.
I let the microphone go and it's used off my computer or wherever you guys were recording, I'll be like, maybe I'm not using that microphone again. Sorry.
Yeah,
Like, I could just get my $100 or something back or something, or how much it was.
yeah, it was brutal. It was a brutal moment.
I'm sure. Like I remember back then, like when I started, there were so many mix-ups. I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna make it for another few months with this recording setup. I was like, this is awful. This is awful. But I think this is the best way to wrap up this episode. I really appreciate you coming on and taking time with us again. It means so much.
Of
It's
course,
crazy. It's been 4 years since we last talked. It's
wild.
crazy to think about. Like, I mean, like with the pandemic and all of that, so many things have changed since a few years ago. And I really appreciate you for a million times, like for coming on, being our first ever guest. I can't even
Of
tell you how
course.
much it means to me and all of that. So thank you so much.
Happy to do it. Absolutely happy to do it. I think it's super cool that you have continued to do it this long and are still finding joy and happiness, and you've clearly improved at what you do. And so it's, I don't know, it's really cool to see. So,
Thank you. That means so much. Thank you everyone for listening. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. I'll also put our first episode in the link. I mean, there's a lot of progress since that episode, don't get me wrong. There was a lot of, first word, first conversation in that episode. There's a lot of progress since then. But I'll make sure to put all of that in the description along with the Big Swing podcast. It's a must listen and check out the Joe Kelly episode. That is a good episode. Don't get me wrong. That's one of my personal favorite episodes. But thank you everyone for listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, and review, and I'll talk to you guys very soon.